Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of First Maccabees, the 5th chapter. And in this chapter, pretty much after the 4th chapter, dealing with the rededication, of the temple, after the heathens had profaned it, and we had finally gained it back and dedicated it, to our God. This is First Maccabees Chapter 5, verse 1. Now when the nations round about heard that the altar was built and the sanctuary renewed as before, it displeased them very much. Wherefore they thought to destroy the generation of Jacob that was among them, and thereupon they began to slay and destroy the people. So basically, they started to go after the Israelites that were amongst them, right? If they were in the land of Ammon, they would start targeting them, right? Moab, Edom, and so on. Then Judas fought against the children of Esau in Idumea at Arabatine, because they besieged Gio, and he gave them a great overthrow and abated their courage and took their spoils. Also he remembered the iniquity of the children of Ben, which had been a snare and an offense unto the people, in that they lay in wait for them in the ways. And I believe this is dealing with the Moabites, as these three main neighbors of Israel were basically like the main troublemakers, right, for us, as thorns in our sides, right? Because you had the Edomites in the south, or southeast-ish, and then you had the Moabites on the east, along with the Ammonites, all right, on our east. In verse 5, it says, he shut them up, therefore, in the towers, which were their strongholds, and encamped against them, and destroyed them utterly, and burned the towers of that place with fire, and all that were therein. So he basically surrounded them, locked them in there so they couldn't come out, and lit it up, and they just burned up in there. Afterward, he passed over to the children of Ammon, where he found a mighty power, which is their army, that is, and much people, with Timotheus their captain. Now keep in mind that you had Antiochus Epiphanes, right, the king at the time, and he had set up, I believe at this point he had already given Lysias, which was like his his second in command, you could say, one charged over his son, but also over part of the affairs of the kingdom. So that being said, there were you would call them governors today, right? But there were men that were set up, appointed over different regions. Obviously, that would report back up to whatever ranking system they set up there. But there you go. So you had men like Timotheus and different individuals, some of the heathen nations, right? But they would ultimately report up to the Greeks. It says here, so he fought many battles with them, till at length they were discomfited before him, and he smote them, right? So they engaged in many battles, but at the end, Judas ended up winning. And when he had taken Jazer, with the towns belonging thereto, he returned unto Judea. Then the heathen that were at Gilad, which is Gilead, assembled themselves together against the Israelites that were in their quarters, to destroy them. But they fled to the fortress of Dathima. So basically, they turned their targets, they turned their sights to the Israelites that were basically in that region amongst them, until the Israelites that were there had to flee into that fortress, and sent letters unto Judas and his brethren. The heathen is basically saying, the heathen that are round about us are assembled together against us to destroy us, and they are preparing to come and take the fortress whereunto we are fled, Timotheus being captain of their host. Come now. So basically, this guy that was defeated before, he seemingly mustered up another reinforcements to go after now the Israelites that were in the region. So they're calling out for help from Judas and those that were with him. Come now, therefore, and deliver us from their hands, for many of us are slain. Yea, all our brethren that were in the places of Toby are put to death. Now, when you look into that, I believe that was basically it was an area within that side of Gilead where you had a lot of Israelites that used to dwell there. Okay, so you had a heavy presence of Israelites dwelling there, and once again, since the heathens round about had turned their sights on the Israelites in that region, they started to go after them and kill them. Their wives and their children also have they carried away captives and borne away their stuff, and they have destroyed there about 1,000 men. Whilst these letters were yet reading, behold, there came other messengers from Galilee, so now this is more up north, with their clothes rent, who reported on this wise. So you got east of the Jordan, in Gilead, basically Israel asking for help, and then you got north going up to Galilee, and they're basically asking for help too. And said, they of Ptolemais and of Tyrus and Zidon and all Galilee of the Gentiles are assembled together against us to consume us. Because remember, they were having heard that we had been able to rededicate the temple and we were good now, they were upset. So as we read in the first few verses, they turned and started to go after the Israelites that were amongst them. Now when Judas and the people heard these words, there assembled a great congregation together to consult what they should do for their brethren that were in trouble and assaulted of them. All right, so being attacked by these heathens, how are they going to handle this? Because now you have multiple cases going on. Then said Judas unto Simon his brother, choose thee out men, and go and deliver thy brethren that are in Galilee. For I and Jonathan, my brother, will go into the country of Gilead. So he basically said, okay, we'll do like a divide and conquer, right? I'll go with Jonathan into Gilead. You go up to Galilee, and let's take care of it. So he left Joseph, the son of Zacharias, and Azarias, captains of the people, with the remnant of the host in Judea to keep it. So he left them in charge in Judea. He went to Gilead, and Simon and the men that were with him went up to Galilee. Unto whom he gave commandment, saying, take ye the charge of this people, and see that ye make not war against the heathen until the time that we come again. So just you're in charge here. Just protect them and keep them here. Don't go and start any problems. Don't go start any wars. Don't go to fight anybody. Just make sure everybody here is good until we get back. Now unto Simon were given 3,000 men to go into Galilee, and unto Judas 8,000 men for the country of Gilead. Then went Simon into Galilee, where he fought many battles with the heathen, so that the heathen were discomfited by him. So he cooked them. All right. And this was all because the Lord had put the Spirit on us, and he was helping us, right, via the Hasmonean family, i.e. Judas and his brethren, to be able to have this mighty victory against our adversaries. And and he pursued them unto the gate of Ptolemais, and there were slain of the heathen about 3,000 men, whose spoils he took. And those that were in Galilee and in Arbitus, with their wives and their children and all that they had, took he away with him, and brought them into Judea with great joy. Right, so basically he delivered them from the hand of the heathens that were round about him, and brought them to Judea because it would be safer over there. Judas Maccabees also, or Maccabeus also, and his brother Jonathan went over Jordan and traveled 3 days' journey in the wilderness, where they met with the Nabathites, which I believe that's the Nabateans. And it tells you they were like Arab people. They were probably Ishmaelites that were in the area. So when they met them, they basically filled them in as to what was going on. Who came on to them in a peaceable manner, and told them everything that had happened to their brethren in the land of Gilead, and how that many of them were shut up in Bosra, which is Basra, and Bosor, and Alima, and Casphor, Maked, and Karnaim. All these cities are strong and great. So Israel fled into the strongholds, right? And basically just kept themselves in there in those cities because that was the only protection they could have, being that the heathens turned on them, trying to basically eliminate them, and that they were shut up in the rest of the cities of the country of Gilead, and that against tomorrow they had appointed to bring their host against the forts. So the enemies were planning the next day to take their armies against those the fortresses in which Israel were holed up in, and to take them and to destroy them all in one day. So the heathen armies were set that tomorrow being that day, they would go and basically destroy Israel, right? Break through their fortified cities and take them down. Hereupon Judas and his host turned suddenly by the way of the wilderness onto Bosra, and when he had won the city, he slew all the males with the edge of the sword, and took all their spoils, and burned the city with fire. From whence he removed by night, and went till he came to the fortress. And betimes in the morning, which is early in the morning, they looked up, and behold, there was an innumerable people bearing ladders and other engines of war to take the fortress, for they assaulted them. So in the morning when they looked up, they saw the armies of the heathens, and the ladders and engines of war were like, you have like battering rams and all of these things that and actual ladders so that they could remember, if you're going up against a fortress, you need to scale the walls, hence you have your ladders, or use those rams to break through the walls or the door, as best as you can. So these were tools and instruments to help them get past that fortress, get past that wall. And as they saw that the heathens were basically already starting to assault the Israelites and closing in on them fast. When Judas therefore saw that the battle was begun, and that the cry of the city went up to heaven with trumpets and a great sound, he said unto his host, Fight this day for your brethren. So he encouraged his men. Basically, it's go time. So he went forth behind them in 3 companies, who sounded their trumpets and cried with prayer. This being Judas's men, he broke them up into 3 groups. Then the host of Timotheus, knowing that it was Maccabees, fled from him. Wherefore he smote them with a great slaughter, so that there were killed of them that day about 8,000 men. So they were afraid, because they knew he was bad news, at least for them. So the second day, they said, no, we out of here. But it was too late. They were already pursuing them. And as it says, they killed 8,000 men of them. This done, Judas turned aside to Maspah, and after he had assaulted it, he took and slew all the males therein, and received the spoils thereof, and burnt it with fire. From thence went he and took Casphon, Maged, Bosor, and the other cities of the country of Gilead. After these things gathered Timotheus another host, and encamped against Raphon beyond the brook. So after they fled, and some of his men were killed, he went and got reinforcements and came back again. He said, all right, now this time we're ready. So Judas sent men to espy the host, to go and basically spy it out and see, okay, what do they look like? How many are they? What's their formation like? All of these things. Who brought him word, saying, all the heathen that be round about us are assembled unto them, even a very great host. So he didn't just come with any army. The Syrians, the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, all the heathens that were around Israel basically joined forces with him. He hath also hired the Arabians to help them, and they have pitched their tents beyond the brook, which is a body of water, ready to come and fight against thee. Upon this, Judas went to meet them, i.e. to approach unto them. Then Timotheus said unto the captains of his host, When Judas and his host come near the brook, if he pass over first unto us, we shall not be able to withstand him, for he will mightily prevail against us. But if he be afraid and camp beyond the river, we shall go over unto him and prevail against him. So he knew, because he knew if the second Judas, Judas and his hosts were to cross that means that they're saying that they're not going to stand a chance. But if they didn't, then there's something wrong or something to Judas's disadvantage. All right, which is why he didn't just immediately come after them, and they would take that as a sign to go on the attack, the offensive, and go after Judas and his men. Now, when Judas came near the brook, he caused the scribes of the people, being the officers, to remain by the brook, unto whom he gave commandment, saying, suffer no man to remain in the camp, but let all come to the battle. So let nobody stay behind. Everybody is going to come and fight in this war, in this battle. So he went first over unto them, and all the people after him. Then all the heathen, being discomfited, because they're like, oh, shit, yeah, he's crossing. Being discomfited before him, cast away their weapons and fled into the temple, or onto the temple that was at Karnaim. This is likely a fortified temple or place in that city. So they fled up in there thinking that they can hold up in there and be safe. But they took the city and burned the temple with all that were therein. So the people that were in there, they were burned alive, basically. Thus was, because it was either you come out and be slain, or you stay in there, and while the building is lit on fire, and eventually the walls collapse, and then you either suffocate from the smoke, you burn in the fire, or you get crushed by the debris. Thus was Karnaim subdued, neither could they stand any longer before Judas. Then Judas gathered together all the Israelites that were in the country of Gilead, from the least unto the greatest, even their wives and their children and their stuff, a very great host, to the end they might come into the land of Judea. So he brought them back. So at this point, after we saw in the first few chapters where Jerusalem was desolate, right? The temple was just, it was just unrecognizable. Israel had fled due to the calamities that had transpired in the first chapter. Now, with the Lord having raised up the Hasmonean family, and through the leadership of Judas, having been able to recover different strongholds and drive off the enemy forces, now Israel is basically returning back. Okay, he was gathering them, returning them back to Judea, and basically after having dedicated the temple, so they were having some degree of normalcy. Now, when they came to Ephron, this was a great way. Slakia, this was a great city in the way as they should go. So very well fortified. So on their way, right, they come across the city, and it was a huge fortified city. They could not turn from it either on the right hand or the left, but must needs pass through the midst of it. So that it was such a huge city that it wouldn't make sense to try and go around it. They said, look, the only feasible path here is to go through it. Then they of the city shut them out and stopped the gates with stones. They said, nope, we're not letting you in here. And then they basically barricaded the gates with stones behind it, so they couldn't open the gates. Whereupon Judas sent unto them in peaceable manner, saying, let us pass through your land to go into our own country, and none shall do you any hurt. We will only pass through on foot. Howbeit they would not open unto him. Wherefore Judas commanded a proclamation to be made throughout the host, that every man should pitch his tent in the place where he was. So basically, they were going to lay siege to it. So the soldiers pitched and assaulted the city all that day and all that night, till at the length the city was delivered into their hands. So they kept attacking it, weakening the walls, breaking it down as best they could, until eventually they made progress. They made headway, got the upper hand, and you know what happened to the rest of the inhabitants there at that point. Verse 51, who then slew all the males with the edge of the sword and razed the city. When you raze it, it means you destroy it or level it, and took the spoils thereof and passed through the city over them that were slain. So We gonna go through it one way or another, right? Either we go through it peacefully, nobody gets hurt, or the other way, which ended up being the case. After this went they over Jordan into the great plain before Bethshan, or Bethsan, which is Bethshan. And Judas gathered together those that came behind and exhorted the people all the way through till they came into the land of Judea. Right, so he kept them encouraged, and that so they could continue on, because it was still a journey, and with how many Israelites he had with him, it probably was a lot. Okay, a very huge multitude with their wives and their children and so on, and their cattle, all the stuff they had, right? So they went up to Mount Zion with joy and gladness, where they offered burnt offerings, because not one of them were slain until they had returned in peace. See? Now what time as Judas and Jonathan were in the land of Gilead, and Simon his brother in Galilee before Ptolemais. So this is like a little flashback saying, okay, we saw how things went with Simon. We saw how things went with Judas. Now, this is what transpired with Joseph and Azarias, the captains that were left in charge, while Judas and Simon were in the different areas delivering Israel over there. So it says, Joseph, the son of Zacharias, and Azarias, captains of the garrisons, which were the station of troops that Judas had left behind, heard of the valiant acts and warlike deeds which they had done, right? Because this wasn't a 1 day or 2 hour thing. So they were out for some time. And so while Joseph and Azarias were hearing of the things they were doing, how they were defeating the enemy and all of that, wherefore they said, let us also get us a name and go fight against the heathen that are round about us. So they disobeyed what Judas told them, because they also wanted to get some fame and get a name for themselves. So when they had given charge unto the garrison that was with them, they went toward Jamnia. So they basically said, yo, let's go. We're going to go in this area. We're going to go take out these heathens over here too. Judas is doing it. Simon is doing it. Shit. Then came Gorgias and his men out of the city to fight against them. And so it was that Joseph and Azarias were put to flight. They went there and they said, oh no, this is way above your pay grade, and pursued onto the borders of Judea, and there were slain that day of the people of Israel about 2,000 men. So they went and got Jake killed for no reason, because they were disobedient. They wanted clout. They wanted to be known. They wanted glory. Thus was there a great overthrow among the children of Israel, because they were not obedient unto Judas and his brethren, but thought to do some valiant act. Moreover, these men came not of the seed of those by whose hand deliverance was given unto Israel. So the Lord chose the sons of Mattathias, right, the Hasmoneans, to be the ones by which he would bring this deliverance here. Now, these men were Israelites, but they weren't of that line. Okay, hence they basically tried to go and gain glory unto themselves, and ended up getting Israelites killed in the process. Howbeit the man Judas and his brethren were greatly renowned in the sight of all Israel and of all the heathen, wheresoever their name was heard of. So even amongst the heathen, they were like feared and known. And so much as the people assembled unto them with joyful acclamations. Afterwards went Judas forth with his brethren and fought against the children of Esau in the land toward the south, where he smote Hebron and the towns thereof, and pulled down the fortress of it, and burned the towers thereof round about. From thence he removed to go into the land of the Philistines, and passed through Samaria. At that time certain priests, desirous to show their valor, were slain in battle, for that they went out to fight unadvisedly. See? So they also, once again, they're seeing the fame, they're seeing the glory that's coming because of the victories that the Lord is given to Judas and his brethren. they said, well, we preach too. You know, we want to show our strength. We also want to let it be known we out here too. Well, they went and they were killed. Because they basically did it of their own accord. So Judas turned to Azotus, which is, I believe it's Ashdod, in the land of the Philistines. And when he had pulled down their altars and burned their carved images with fire and spoiled their cities, he returned into the land of Judea. And that brings us to the end of the book of 1 Maccabees, the 5th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rechak Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.